Cheryl stopped, looked me right in the eye, and she said, I can see when you do that thing with your hand that I'm going to have to be a lot more direct with you. When you say every third word, it makes you sound stupid. Now, she's got my full attention. And some people might say that it was mean of Cheryl to say I sounded stupid, but it was actually the kindest thing she could possibly have done for me at that moment in my career.
In Napoleon Hill's timeless classic, Think and Grow Rich, he defines a mastermind group as the coordination of knowledge and effort between two or more people for the attainment of a definite purpose. In this podcast, that coordination is created between you, me, and our amazing guests. Our definite purpose is achieving extraordinary results in your business and your life. I'm your host, Brad Mulvey. Welcome to the Millennial Mastermind Podcast. Hello, Millennial Mafia. Welcome back to the Millennial Mastermind Podcast, where I have the pleasure of interviewing guests who will provide us with the tools, tactics, and inspiration to take our businesses and our lives to the next level. Today, I have the honor of interviewing Kim Scott. Kim is the author of the New York Times and Wall Street Journal best-selling book, Radical Candor, Be a Kick-Ass Boss Without Losing Your Humanity. Kim led AdSense, YouTube, and DoubleClick online sales and operations at Google, and then joined Apple to develop and teach a leadership seminar. Kim has been a CEO coach at Dropbox, Qualtrics, Twitter, and several other tech companies. Previously, she was the co-founder and CEO of Juice Software. She has also received her MBA from Harvard Business School and her BA from Princeton University. So, freaking A, Kim, like that, just reading through that bio, it's definitely one of the more impressive ones that we've had on the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for honoring us with your presence today. And I'm excited to dive into a lot of it and this whole concept of radical candor.
Well, it's great to be here, and I'm excited to hear about the businesses everybody is starting.
Yeah,
cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that a lot of what we're going to talk about is perfectly applicable to the young leaders who are listening. So to kind of kick things off, would you mind just sharing a little bit about this concept of radical candor and really what it means and where you came across this idea?
Sure. I think the best place to start is by just telling you a simple story about a time when my boss criticized me. I had just started my job at Google after having done a startup that failed, and I had to give a presentation to the founders and the CEO about the AdSense business. And I walked into the room, and there's Sergey Brin in toe shoes on an elliptical trainer in one corner of the room. And there is Eric Schmidt, who was the CEO at the time, with his head so deep in his computer, it's like his brain has been plugged into his email. And I, like any normal person, I'm like, how in the world am I supposed to get these people's attention? And I felt a little bit nervous. Luckily, the business that I was leading was on fire. And when I said how many new customers we had added to the AdSense business in the last 2 months, Eric Schmidt, the CEO, almost fell out of his chair. He said, "What did you say? What do you need? Do you need more engineers? Do you need more marketing dollars?" So I'm feeling like the meeting's going all right.
Right.
In fact, yeah, I'm feeling like a genius. And I walk out of the room, and my boss, who is Sheryl Sandberg, I'm expecting a high five or a pat on the back. And instead, she says to me, "Why don't you walk back to my office with me?" And I think, oh boy, I've screwed something up, and I'm sure I'm about to hear about it. And she started by telling me about the things that had gone well in the meeting, not in a shit sandwich kind of way, but actually genuinely seeming to mean what she was saying and teaching me some stuff. But of course, all I really wanted to hear about was what had I done wrong. And so eventually Cheryl said to me, "You said a lot in there. Were you aware of it?" And now I breathed a huge sigh of relief, because if all I had done wrong was say, who really cared when I had a tiger by the tail, right? And I kind of made this brush off gesture with my hand, and I said, "Yeah, I know, it's a verbal tic. It's no big deal, really." And then Cheryl said, I know a really good speech coach and Google would pay for it. Would you like an introduction? And once again, I made this brush off gesture with my hand and I said, no, I'm busy. Didn't you hear about all these new customers? At which point Cheryl stopped, looked me right in the eye, and she said, I can see when you do that thing with your hand that I'm going to have to be a lot more direct with you. When you say every third word, it makes you sound stupid. Now, she's got my full attention. And some people might say that it was mean of Cheryl to say I sounded stupid, but it was actually the kindest thing she could possibly have done for me at that moment in my career, because if she hadn't said it to me just that way, if she hadn't used just those words, I never would have gone to see the speech coach. And if I hadn't, I wouldn't have realized that Cheryl was not exaggerating. I literally said every third word. And I had started 2 companies before joining Google, and I had done it by giving presentations and raising millions of dollars from venture capitalists. So I thought I was pretty good at giving presentations. And all of a sudden, it was like I had this realization that as though I had been walking through my whole career with my fly down and nobody had the common courtesy to tell me, to zip up. I could do it if I knew it was down, but nobody had told me. And so that got me to thinking 2 things, really. One, what was it about Cheryl that made it so seemingly easy for her to tell me? But almost more interestingly, why had no one else told me? Why were people so reluctant to tell me? And I realized in the case of Cheryl, it came down to 2 things. First, and most importantly, Cheryl cared about me, not just as an employee, but as a human being. When I first moved from New York to California to take the job at Google, I didn't really know anyone. I was kind of lonely. And Cheryl could tell, and she invited me to join a book group. When I had a family member fall ill, Cheryl said, go get on the airplane. I'll come up with your coverage plan. We've got you covered. This is what it means to be part of a team. So, and that was the kind of thing that Cheryl did for everyone who worked directly with her. I mean, she obviously couldn't do it for all 7,000 people in her organization, but for the people who worked directly with her, she really cared about them at a very human level. But she never let her concern for our feelings get in the way of her willingness to challenge us directly. And so really radical candor boils down to those 2 things, to caring personally and challenging directly. And that seems so simple, right?
Right.
So it's kind of worth thinking about what happens when you fail on one dimension or another. Almost nobody starts out their career decides to start a company thinking, I don't give a crap about other people, so I'm going to be a great leader, right? That's not how it works. And yet there are times when all of us do challenge someone else very directly, but we fail to show we care personally. And I call that obnoxious aggression. So that's one mistake that we all make. That's not radical candor. And by the way, a lot of people mistake radical candor for obnoxious aggression. So please don't use radical candor as an excuse to act like a jerk. That's not what it is.
Right.
It's not obnoxious aggression. And so now imagine a 2x2. On the vertical axis is care personally. On the horizontal axis is challenge directly. So upper right hand quadrant is radical candor. Then you have obnoxious aggression. Now, very often when we've been a jerk, we, instead of moving the right direction on on care personally to get up to radical candor, we move the wrong direction on challenge directly. And we issue the false apology. We say, oh, it doesn't really matter, when it really does. And we wind up in the worst place of all, manipulative insincerity. So this is false apology, passive-aggressive behavior, political behavior, all the kinds of things we hate about working at big companies. But if you're not really careful as an entrepreneur, you're going to find that stuff happening at your little company too. So you want to avoid that. But the mistake that people make most often, the thing that I see going wrong 85% of the time, is when people do care, and they care personally about the people who they work with. And because they're so worried about not hurting their feelings, they fail to challenge directly. And that I call ruinous empathy.
Hmm.
And that will kill your company if you let it stand.
Yeah, and I'd love to talk about that quadrant for a minute, because I definitely find myself, I think, sitting there times where I can be such a people pleaser and I just want to be everybody's best friend. And so then there's situations where you find yourself tiptoeing on this line of, okay, I see something that I want to challenge this person on, but I don't want to come off as an asshole. I don't want to go down in that obnoxious aggression quadrant. So you just kind of comfortably settle with that ruinous empathy. So for people in my boat who they're people pleasers, they just want people to like them. What are there any tools or any thoughts that you can share on how to kind of push over into the radical candor sector?
Yeah, so the thing it's a great question, because it's so tempting to hang out there in that ruinous empathy quadrant.
It's easy and it's comfortable.
Yeah. And I think the thing that you can do to help prod yourself to get out of it is to think about the long-term impact of hanging out there. Think about what happens over time when you hang out there. Think about a moment in your career where you should have given somebody, or just in your life, frankly, where you should have given somebody some feedback, but you didn't. So the story of this guy that I hired when I had built, early in my career, I built a software company, and I hired this guy, we'll call him Bob, and I really liked Bob. He was smart, he was charming, he was funny. He would do stuff like, we were at a manager offsite and we were all stressed out, and we somehow wound up playing one of those endless get to know you games, and nobody wanted to be the jerk who said, I don't have time to get to know you people, we got to get back to work. But Bob was the one who had the courage to raise his hand and say, why don't we just do something and it'll be really fun and really fast. We were all down with really fast, no matter what it was. So Bob says, let's just go around the table and confess what candy our parents used when potty training us. Weird, but fast. And then for the next 10 months, anytime there was a tense moment in a meeting, Bob would whip out just the right piece of candy for the right person at the right moment. So anyway, we liked Bob. He was funny, he was charming, and it was fun to work with him. One problem with Bob, he was doing terrible work, absolutely terrible work. And I couldn't understand what was going on, because he had this amazing resume, all these great accomplishments in his past. I learned much later that the problem was Bob was smoking pot in the bathroom 4 times a day, which maybe explained all that candy. But
that'll do it.
Yep, that'll do it. Unfortunately, I didn't know any of that at the time. All I knew is that Bob would hand work into me and there was shame in his eyes. He knew it wasn't nearly good enough. But because I didn't want to hurt his feelings, I would just say, oh, Bob, this is a great start. You're so smart, though. You're so awesome. We all love working with you. Maybe you can just make it a little better. And of course, he never did. And this goes on for 10 months. All his peers are having to cover for him. So maybe I'm being, quote unquote, nice to Bob, but I'm not being so nice to everybody else in the company. And this goes on, and eventually the inevitable happens. And I realize that if I don't fire Bob, I'm going to lose all my best performers on the team. And I can't afford that. We're a tiny little company, and that'll kill us. So I sat down with Bob to have a conversation that I should have begun 10 months before. And when I finished talking, he kind of pushed the chair back from his table, and he looked at me in the eye and he said, why didn't you tell me? And as that question is going around in my head with no good answer, he said, why didn't anyone tell me? I thought you all cared about me. And now I realize that I've been trying to be nice to Bob, and now I'm winding up firing him. Not so nice after all.
Right.
And I failed him in some really important ways. I failed to solicit feedback from Bob. I didn't know what was going well from his perspective, and I didn't know what was going bad. Maybe I was doing something that was driving him so crazy he was forced to toke up in the bathroom. I don't know. I didn't ask him, right? I didn't ask him what I might be doing that was contributing to the problem. And I also failed to give him praise that was meaningful. The kind of praise I gave him was really just a lie, a head fake. And I failed to give him real criticism. I failed to tell him when his work wasn't nearly good enough. And perhaps worst of all, I also failed to create the kind of an environment in which everyone would tell Bob what was really good about what he was doing and when he was going off the rails. And because I failed Bob in all these different ways, he's now getting fired because of it. And all I could do in that, it was too late to save Bob. Even Bob at this point agreed that he should go. All I could do in the moment was make myself a very solemn promise that I would never make that mistake again, and that I would do everything I could to help other people avoid making that mistake. So one of the things to return to your question, that was a long-winded answer, but to return to your question, one of the things you can do to avoid ruinous empathy is to figure out what's your Bob story, what's your cautionary tale. And whenever you're tempted not to say something to somebody, think about that tale and think about how you want to be genuinely kind to that person, not just in the moment, but over the long haul.
Right. Actually doing them the favor of pointing out where they can improve, or whatever that situation is. That makes total sense.
Yeah, where they can improve, or if you tell somebody where you think they can improve, it's a gift in one of two ways. It's a gift, maybe if you're right, it's a gift because you point out a problem and they can fix it, but you might be wrong. You might be incorrect. And it's also important to remember, humility is such an important part of radical candor. It's also important to remember that you're giving them a gift because you're sharing what you think, and that gives them an opportunity to correct what you think if it's wrong.
So then on the flip side, you talked about obnoxious aggression, or that kind of that jerk quadrant. And I think that anybody who's worked in the business world for more than a month can think of somebody who fits that role. Anyone
who's just been a human being for more than about a month.
Exactly. More than a day. So how can we avoid coming off as an asshole then, as we're trying to share this radical candor?
Yeah, it's really, really a great question. The first thing you can do is, because that is another reason why we very often wind up in ruinous empathy, because we're afraid of coming off as a jerk. And so I think a few things are important. The first thing is to remember the order of operations. Start by soliciting feedback. Don't dish it out till you prove you can take it. And also remember that you want to next focus on the good stuff. Focus on giving praise. Your job as a leader is to show what success looks like. And it's much more important to show the good things than the bad things when you're trying to show what success looks like. It's showing what it does look like is even more important than showing what it does not look like, and being very clear about that. So that's really important. Another thing before you jump into offering criticism, which is important to do, but so first you're soliciting feedback. Next, and more specifically, you're soliciting criticism. Next, you're giving praise. Before you head into conversations where you're giving criticism, make sure you're humble about it. Very often, people treat an arrogance problem as though it's a communication problem. And they come to me and they say, I just don't understand why people always hate me when I tell them where they're screwing up. And then I start to ask them some questions about how they feel about that other person. And it turns out they kind of think that they're a lot better, smarter, just, more powerful than the other person. I think you just saw my dog come in.
No problem.
That's okay. So you want to make sure that you are offering criticism from a place of humility, from a recognition that here's what I think, what do you think? It's not the truth. The moment you go into somebody and you say, I'm going to tell you the truth, it's kind of like telling them, I've got a pipeline to God and you don't know shit from Shinola. And that's like not a great way to start a conversation and not to come off like a jerk. So those are my pieces of advice for how not to wind up in the obnoxious aggression quadrant. Another thing, though, that is important to remember is that the radical candor framework, again, imagine a 2x2 radical candor, top right, obnoxious aggression, bottom right, top left is ruinous empathy, bottom left, worst place of all, is manipulative insincerity. Think of that framework it's not a Myers-Briggs personality test. Don't think about these things as labels to hang around people's neck. Think about these things, these terms, and the framework as a compass, and use it to guide yourself in the right direction. There are going to be times where you've started out with every good intention, all the humility in the world of being radically candid, and the other person is going to think you're a jerk. That will happen. I'm not going to promise you that it'll never happen. It almost inevitably will happen. And the key thing in those moments is to react with grace and to sort of move up on the care personally dimension to show the person what your intentions are, that you're trying to help them, to show that you have compassion for their feelings. Like, just eliminate the phrase, don't take it personally, from your vocabulary. Yeah. It's not helpful.
It is personal. And I think that you mentioned the book, but it's so important that you have a relationship established already, especially with the people that you're working with on a regular basis, if it's in your company. But if you have done the legwork of creating a strong relationship with them and you do actually care personally about them, it makes this whole radical candor piece a lot easier because they believe you that you care for them.
Yes, you've proven it. It is a lot easier. Although remember, it's very tempting to sort of hang out in ruinous sympathy, thinking that's where you build a relationship, but it's not. The seeds of trust actually get sown in radical candor. So if you take a simple example, like let's imagine you've just met somebody, you've just started working with them, and you're sitting down to lunch, and at the end of the lunch, you notice they have a giant hunk of spinach between their teeth. Like, is it going to be better for the relationship to tell them or not tell them? It's better to tell them. It's a little awkward. But if you don't tell them, then they're going to go to the bathroom, and they're going to see the spinach, and they're going to think, why didn't they tell me?
Right. So there's another quote that you have, I forget if it's in the book or if I pulled it out of your TED Talk, but you said, you can't give a damn about others if you don't give a damn about yourself.
Yes.
I really, really love this quote. So would you mind just explaining that a little bit?
You know, it is so tempting, especially when you're an entrepreneur and you're starting this business and you feel the weight of everything on your shoulders. It's so tempting to burn yourself out and to sort of take everybody's problems on your shoulders and to think that you're somehow hurting your business if you get enough sleep or work out or eat well or whatever the things are that you need to do to remain sane. And the fact of the matter is, if you think about your job as a leader, you are at the very center of that wheel. And if you're off kilter, everything else that follows is going to be badly off kilter. You know, if the center of a wheel is out of alignment just a little bit, it just can't turn. So you want to keep yourself. You want to take care of yourself at the very core. You can't manage other people if you can't manage yourself. And the next ring, concentric circle of your responsibility as a leader is your relationships. The relationships that you have with each of the people who work directly with you. And unless you build strong relationships, it's going to become very difficult for you to fulfill your responsibilities, which are to create a culture of feedback so everybody is helping everybody know what's good and know what needs fixing, to build strong, cohesive teams, and last but not least, to achieve results. And all of these things interact with each other. The stronger the relationship, the easier it is to fulfill your responsibilities. The better job you do fulfilling your responsibilities, the stronger your relationships get. So they reinforce each other positively or negatively. So you want to make sure you get it right. And then the feedback, the team, and the results all either go in a virtuous cycle or in a vicious cycle, depending again on you and your relationships at the very center.
Yeah, absolutely. And so kind of turning to another direction of something else you talked about in the book was this concept of rock stars versus superstars.
Yeah.
And this one really caught my attention because I struggled with this for a long time. Of I had this high ambition to keep moving upwards in my career and to go on and create bigger and better things, within my life, within the companies I've worked at, within my own business. And so I just assumed that everyone was like this.
Yeah.
And when I realized that not everyone is like that, I struggled with it. I was like, why wouldn't you want that? Like, obviously, you want the bigger, better thing. You want to do more. You want to be more productive. So I would love if you wouldn't mind just kind of touching on these these topics of kind of the difference between a rising star and a superstar, and why people need to be aware of these differences of personalities.
Yeah, it is a mistake that I made for much of my career. And it kind of got corrected for me. I was working at Apple and I was working with a leader who I really admired. And she said to me, "You've really got to manage your superstars and your rock stars differently, don't you?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? What's the difference?" And she said, a superstar is someone who is on a really fast growth trajectory. They want a promotion really soon. They want to learn new things. They want to have more impact. They want things to change all the time. Your superstars on your team are often a force for growth, and they're really important. But you can't forget about your rock stars. Your rock stars are the people on your team who are the Rock of Gibraltar. So think about the Rock of Gibraltar, not Bruce Springsteen or something. And these are the people who love their job. They're great at their job. They're exceptional at their job. It's not like they're quote unquote B players. They're A players, but they don't necessarily want the next job. And they don't necessarily want your job or to be Steve Jobs or anything like that. They just want to keep doing their job. And if you don't screw it up, they'll keep doing that job often for years. And these people are the force of stability on your team. And you need to be explicit about what's the right ratio of superstars, rock stars, what's the right, and by the way, I should really call it superstar mode, because we all in our careers are going to hit phases when we are in superstar mode, but also when we're in rock star mode. When we've very often we've achieved a certain level of success, we have developed an expertise, and something else happens in our life. And we're more focused on that other thing than on getting to the next level at work. So maybe we get some poetry published and we want to spend more time writing poetry, but that doesn't pay the bills. And so you want to keep your job, but you don't necessarily want to invest all the extra time and effort required to get the next job. Often this happens when people have kids, when they start a family, they want to get home for dinner instead of spending those extra 4 hours at the office learning the next new thing. Often it happens if a family member is ill. If you think about Einstein in the patent office, he didn't care about getting the next promotion. He just wanted to get his paycheck and get home so that he had time to come up with the general theory of relativity, right? And so if you don't screw it up for people, you can have a much more stably growing team if you honor both. But it's very tempting if you yourself are in rock star mode to want to clip the wings of the superstars on your team, or if you yourself are in superstar mode to sort of look down your nose at the rock stars. And it's a big mistake, either one.
So why is that? What is the downside to those scenarios of not having that ability to see the side of the others?
Well, if everyone on your team is in superstar mode and you're growing really fast, and you don't have any any people who are in rock star mode, very often the wheels come off the bus and things fly apart. You need some stability.
Mm-hmm.
And also there are often jobs that lend themselves more to rock star mode than superstar mode. And if you force people who are in superstar mode into these rock star jobs, they get bored and agitated and morale goes into the crapper. So you want to make sure that you're putting the right people in the right kinds of roles. And you want to make sure also that you're respecting them for the work that they do. I think we've all been at companies where there are certain roles that are vital for the success of the business, but that for whatever reason, people look down their noses at.
Right.
And you're not going to get. I once worked with a consumer product company, and they had a big call center, and the call center was actually really important to their business. And one of the leaders said, "Well, the work is so boring, we have to hire B players." And that was just so obnoxious. The people didn't want the jobs if their manager treated them that way.
Right.
So you want to find the people who love doing the work and are exceptional at it, and you want to treat them like rock stars. You don't want to treat them like B players.
Right. No, that makes a ton of sense because, those different roles, like you're saying, are essential. You need the stability, but then you need those superstars who are pushing ahead, really forging the new trails and really forging the new direction of the company. So looking back, taking all that you learn, it could be radical candor involved or not. Is there one thing that you've learned throughout your career that if you could go back, hop in a time machine and talk to yourself when you're just getting out of school, out of Harvard Business School, getting your MBA, assuming that was at the beginning of your career, you could correct me if
there was a diamond cutting factory before that.
All right, perfect. Let's go to the diamond cutting factory. If you could talk to Kim when she was at the diamond cutting factory, is there one piece of advice that you've learned over these past years that you'd give to yourself at that stage in your journey?
Yes, I think early on in my career, it really felt to me that I had to make a choice between being a jerk and successful and nice and unsuccessful. Mm. And that is such a false dichotomy.
Yeah,
it is
I think that's one that a lot of people feel, and a lot of people associate the jerk or the asshole with the successful guy. So please continue with that. But yes.
Yeah, no, early in my career, when I had started this company and I had hired about 65 people, and I walked into work one day and I got the same article emailed to me from about probably 20 different people. And the article was about how there had been some research done and people would much rather have a boss who's a real asshole but competent than one who's really nice but incompetent. And I remember thinking, are they sending me this because they think I'm an asshole or because they think I'm incompetent? And which is worse, And I think it's such a shame because that is not a choice you have to make. You can actually be super competent and also genuinely kind. And that's, in many ways, that is what radical candor is about combining the caring and the challenging at the same time.
Well, I love that you're dispelling that myth and that you're proving that that's a false dichotomy. So Kim, anybody who's interested in learning more about radical candor or learning more about you and your impressive career and the fun things that you're working on, where can they go to learn more?
RadicalCandor.com has a bunch of resources and a way for you to contact me or follow me on Twitter at Kimball Scott or at Candor on Twitter. And we post a lot of tips every day. And I always love hearing people's stories and experiences with radical candor.
All right, Kim. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It was a very fun 30 minutes just to learn about this a little bit deeper. And I know that people are going to take a lot out of this, and it's going to help propel everybody who's listening into further and deeper levels of success. So really appreciate your time.
Great. Well, wish all of your listeners great success with their businesses. It's fun. Enjoy it.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thank you again for stopping by today to spend a little bit of time with me and the rest of the Millennial Mafia. Just a reminder, you can find all of today's show notes at millennialmm.com/podcast. And if you haven't heard yet, I'm opening up my calendar to you, the listeners, to hop on a 15-minute call with me. The sole purpose of this call is to connect and get to know each other. I want to forge true relationships with you so that we can build up an amazing network and community of ambitious millennials who are going to be the leaders and influencers of tomorrow. If you're interested, please just go to millennialmm.com/call and snag a 15-minute time slot. I look forward to connecting with you. Peace out.